The Adam Carolla Show presents Andrew Yang's birthday cocktail party for January 13th. Let's see who's invited. Let's welcome His Highness King Henry II. American actor and the host of Unsolved Mysteries, Robert Stack is here. One of the guitarists from Yes, Trevor Rabin. We welcome Charles Nelson Riley and Rip Taylor. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Country singer Trace Adkins. Patrick Dempsey is here, and he's arm in arm with the television creator who killed off his character in Grey's Anatomy. We welcome Shonda Rhimes. Andrew Yang is on the Adam Carolla Show.
Andrew, good to see you again, my friend.
How are you, Adam? Great to be here.
I'm doing well. The book, Forward, Notes on the Future of Our Democracy, and it's available now on Amazon or anywhere you buy finer books. And I should say the podcast as well, Forward with Andrew Yang. So I've always followed you, always listened to you. Now we're talking about a third party, so I want to get into some of those nuts and bolts as well. What made you think about starting a third party, and what makes you think it's plausible now in the current climate?
I wrote this book after I came off the presidential trail in 2020, and I tried to figure out why so many of us feel so stuck, why politics seems so broken and dysfunctional. And the big insight I had, Adam, was that it's not working because it's not designed to work. It's not supposed to work. It turns out that our duopoly is setting us up. It's setting us up to fail. It's setting us up to hate our fellow Americans. We are trending towards political violence and civil war 2.0. And so faced with that realization, I thought, okay, what would actually free us from this? And the only thing I found that would free us would be to change the incentives of our government leaders and officials. And that requires a populist movement to break up the duopoly, introduce new political points of view. And the path to get there is a third party, which I call the Forward Party, not left or right, but forward. Figure that'd be pretty catchy and easy to remember. But it was because I dug into why things aren't working right now. And this was the only solution.
Yeah, I mean, I love competition in general. Like, you know, if there were only two makes of cars or two taco restaurants or two of anything, how good would the product be? And then also, if you just kind of took it as, well, let's just say there's only McDonald's and only Burger King, and there are no other opportunities or choices for a hamburger. And then McDonald's and Burger King spent the lion's share of their time talking shit about the other versus trying to make a better burger. How would the customer benefit from that? And I kind of think it sounds like a weird analogy, but does it sound apt to you?
I think it's spot on, Adam, because check it out. Like I'm a child of the 80s. And so I remember McDonald's versus Burger King. But imagine if there was no In-N-Out, no Five Guys, no Shake Shack, what a lesser world we'd be in. That's the world of politics today. You have like the Democrat or Republican Party, which, by the way, most people don't like. Right. 62% of Americans are looking for an alternative, but we keep being told, no, can't happen, isn't possible. And it's nonsense. So your burger joint analogy is spot on, except for the fact that most of us, I think, kind of like McDonald's or Burger King.
Well, I'll go another one, because when I was coming up, there was a time when it was pretty much you had your choice between a Chevy or a Ford. There's the big three auto manufacturers. And by the time you got to the mid 70s, all their products sucked pretty much just across the board. And then at some point, these plucky little Japanese companies started coming in, Nissan, then Datsun, Toyota, Honda, stuff like that. And they really forced the hand of the American cars. I mean, the American Ford makes a great product today, but it's not because Ford wanted to make a great product. They got forced because of this crazed competition to make a great product. And for that matter, electric products. They're doing tons of electric cars now because they don't want to get their lunch eaten, back to the burger analogy, by all these other companies. So why wouldn't this hold true in every facet of society? We've somehow carved out politics and decided, well, that's unnecessary. But everything else benefits greatly from competition.
You are spot on. And the fact is, we should have more competition in our politics. So the big question we should be asking is, why don't we? And the answer is that the two parties are playing you lose, I lose, and just trading power while the rest of us are really doing the losing. And they tell us you can't have anything more than these two parties, even though most of us want it. And if you rewind back to the founding days of the country, our founding fathers hated political parties. John Adams said that two parties would be an evil across the land. George Washington railed against partisanship on his way out. The Republican Party didn't even come into existence until decades later after the Civil War. And the two parties actively suppress any competition. The third biggest party in America right now, objectively, is the Libertarian Party. What's been fascinating, Adam, is that the Libertarians and the Forward Party are now making common cause because we have to try to make it so that there's genuine competition. You're in California, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in New York, and these are one-party towns or states. It's just like the Democrats. And no one can look at the situation and say the Democrats are afraid of competition in these very, very blue areas, because they're not. It's like a one-party town. Whoever wins the primary wins the whole thing. And anyone who's an independent or Republican is essentially an afterthought. And that's not right.
No, I agree. Whatever your business is, competition forces you to not only kind of be smart in your decision making, but it also summons things in you that you didn't know maybe you even had the ability to do. I mean, it's why we love sports. We're so inherently attracted to sports on some sort of visceral level. Like, why is it, if you really think about it as humans, like, why do we love sports so much? And it's like, because it brings this out in the athletes. So you were a Democrat and you ran for president, and your ideas almost were too logical or made too much sense. You didn't talk a lot. You didn't talk down to people enough. You kind of talked too much about math and other things that made sense. And so maybe not sexy for a Democrat. And then I saw you going on shows, going on CNN, talking about political topics. And I thought to myself, this doesn't seem as much like Andrew as it does sort of talking points, because you know there's a side you're on and a side you're not on, and it's kind of hard to navigate that or negotiate that. And I know this sounds, I don't know, this sounds pejorative, but I would hear you say things on TV that didn't really sound like the you I was familiar with before. And I thought, well, he probably wants to stay on CNN. But then when you started the third party, I was like, oh, okay, now that makes more sense. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does, Adam. And I can share with you the dynamics. So CNN asks me to come on in 2020 after I drop out of the race. And I was at a point then where I said, I ran for president to try and get Trump out, because I didn't think Trump was a good president, was hoping that he wouldn't be president for a second term. And so when I was on CNN, I did parrot that message and it was genuine. Like, I wasn't fabricating. Like, I was calculating, what can I say that's going to help get Trump out? So that's, I'll just be very genuine in my motivation. The entire time I did have misgivings about the overall direction of the country. I think that we need a change. And then when I dug into why I felt we needed this change, that's when I realized that it's the duopoly, that the duopoly is turning us against each other. It's not solving any real problems. My approach to things, what you describe as facts or math or whatnot, doesn't actually fit in politically with either party that comfortably. But there are a lot of Americans who want a break from the hate and the polarization, that don't think that other Americans are enemies. They sense that the media is manipulating us and turning us against each other in various ways to make more money.
All right.
And so that's what drove me to the decision to start the Forward Party.
Well, that was going to be my next question. My next question was going to be the media and social media. By the way, I was thinking about the other day, nothing social about social media. Socials used to be like formals and parties, and he's a social person. He's gregarious. He's outgoing. Social, there's nothing social about social media. But it kind of strikes me that as both parties may not have Americans' best interest at heart versus their own, I feel like the media is doing that as well. And I wonder if the media is going, it became kind of clear to me that the media was much more involved with the system than just sort of hanging back and reporting the news. They seem to be very active in the system. How's the media, and tell me, how have the media been in response to a third party?
First, you are completely correct that the media is hand in hand with our political system. There are a lot of relationships there. I talked about it in my book, where during the presidential primary, an MSNBC producer said that there were certain candidates they were told not to interview. I was one of them. And so if you imagine that there are directives coming from various parts of the political system to the media establishment, you are right. That is happening. I think a lot of Americans sense that. And because that there is this hand in glove relationship, where a third party is concerned, a lot of mainstream press has not liked to talk about it. They realize that most Americans don't have a deep affection for either of the two parties, but their interests as a media organization are tied up in getting people animated about the politics of today and generally blaming the other side. I will say that the way I came up as a presidential candidate is the same way the Forward Party is coming up, which is through podcasts. It's one reason why what you do is so important. Independent media voices like yourself, just call it like you see it, and people, agree or disagree, and that they decide if they like or trust you. And you make your own decisions in a way that's independent of these media organizations that genuinely are now in some ways appendages of the political system.
Well, it kind of strikes me that part of the problem with the current two-party system is each party has this history and baggage, if you will, And so often we're trying to talk about a problem or a subject, and then they're always going back into the baggage, like a kind of a bad relationship. It's like, how could you have a relationship with a woman and vice versa? It's easy out on the first date. But if there's a whole history of you cheating and being addicted to gambling, or you banged her sister 4 years ago at a wedding or something like that, how can you move forward with this relationship? Because people keep going, oh, well, you guys, you are the party of slavery, or you're the party of segregation, or you're the one who doesn't care about the rivers and pollution. And, you want a woman's right to choose. And there's all this stuff. And it's all stuff, and we never stop. If you don't believe me about looking into the past, we're tearing down every statue that went up in the last 20 minutes. Like, we do nothing. It's one big, long 1619 project or whatever. It's like constant staring in the rear view. How can this relationship, using the metaphor that a man and a woman trying to go out on a first date, how could you have a relationship with this person and work with this person and raise children with this person if all you're doing is constantly reading the person's diary and seeing the other people they had sex with before you and all the transgressions and everything else? The third party is kind of a baggage-free party. Like, you get to show up. It's the first date. for you guys.
We don't have much of a history. It's true.
Right. So
yeah, one of the experiences I had, Adam, is like I showed up in the Midwest and was like, hey, I'm running for president. And then they said, what party? And I said, Democrat. And it'd be like I just sprouted horns or turned green in certain environments. Whereas now, if I were to say, hey, I'm Forward Party or Forwardist, people would have no reaction at all.
Right.
Because, like you said, you're baggage free.
Well, you're essentially, the other two parties are convicts with long rap sheets. You know what I mean? And examples of doing good things, but they're not interested in that. They'll just pull out the rap sheet and read the rap sheet. Fox will read one rap sheet and CNN will read another rap sheet. And that's kind of where we're at. You couldn't be called anything. And if you were, and I want to know some of the planks of the platform, but I've talked to Dr. Drew about this. He just kind of he was sort of wishing out loud for the last few years that we just had sort of a logic party. You know what I mean? Like where you go, look, I'm not for coal. I'm not against coal. I'm not for wind power or against wind power. I'm just going to crunch some numbers and we're going to move forward based on what makes the most sense. And I don't have any history, so you can't tell me that I'm in bed with the coal industry or I'm taking a bunch of money from Silicon Valley. That seems incredibly attractive to this American, and I'm guessing most Americans these days. Is that sort of the way forward?
That is the Forward Party. Yes, that's right. We are going to be the party of facts and reason and solutions and not judging people. By the way, I mean, who the hell am I to judge? You know what I mean? But when you talk about the baggage that each party has, the game is this. Where what they'll do is they'll take the most extreme controversial figure from the other party and then just hold them up as the poster child. Both sides do this every day. They'll be like, look at this Looney Tunes Democrat and what they're saying about, whatever it is, like what to teach our kids in schools. And then the other side will be like, look at this Looney Tunes Republican and what they said about,
Jewish
whatever
space
the issue
lasers
is.
Or whatever. Right.
Yeah. Whatever
right.
it is. And then they just continuously just inflame and polarize and agitate and caricature, really, where we're at a point now where 42% of either Democrats or Republicans view the other side as evil. And we can sense it. It's one reason why we feel so troubled and why we need a different approach that is logical, fact-based, understanding. Part of my upbringing is that if someone disagrees with me about something, it doesn't mean that they're worth any less than I am. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I think one thing, you think another, like that's cool. And that's what most Americans want.
You ran, or one of the planks in your old platform is universal income. Where are you at with that? And how does that pertain to the Forward Party?
I am still very much in favor of versions of cash relief. At this point, 2/3 of Americans are for some version of universal basic income. I'll tell you the biggest implementation right now, Adam, is this child tax credit that has lifted millions of children out of poverty, like it's going to school supplies and food and stuff like that. I think that there is a way that we can improve people's lives that involves trusting them. I'm not for imagining that like a new bureaucracy is more effective than just putting resources into people's hands, because most people know what they need.
What about education, school choice, vouchers, things of that nature?
One of the reasons why I think the Democrats are taking a beating around the country is that parents, and I'm a parent, got kids in public school and also in a specialized school for autistic kids. And the teachers unions are a huge part of the Democratic Party. And a lot of parents are very frustrated with what's been going on in schools. I think there should be more competition. I think that charter schools are a good thing. A lot of the time they're arising because the public schools have not worked. I think parents should be able to do what they think is right for their kids.
Yeah, I agree. I always err on the side of competition. And I look at competition this way, which is, it's almost impossible to just say whether it's a school system or a podcast. And you just go, look, we're going to give you all the money. You come out with the product you want to come out with, and don't worry, there'll never be any competition. So I'd probably do this show twice a year, and I'd be drunk. If that was,
imagine if there were only 2 podcasts, but each of the podcasters was getting, $10 billion a year.
Right. That'd be the 2 shittiest podcasts on the planet.
Oh, that's a summary of the political parties right now.
Right. So, my thing with competition is, I'm LA Unified, and we have that thing during COVID, all the teachers unions fired up, and, they're in bed with Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Party out here and everything. And my thing is like more charter schools, more vouchers, more choice, more competition. Because I believe that if they had some competition, then LA Unified would up their game as well. It does force. It's not like, oh, we're just getting beat by the competition. No, you actually up your game when the competitor shows up on the block, whether it's a school or a restaurant,
or a political party, agree.
or a political party as well. Where are you at? I'm looking down here, and I'm looking at thorium-based nuclear power, if I'm pronouncing that right. Can we talk about power? A lot of discussion about power. What do we do? How do we get from fossil fuels to clean energy and renewable energy? And I'm all for the switch, except for you can't just cancel the pipeline and then replace it with nothing. We have to have something to replace whatever power the pipeline was producing. I mean, like, I'm out here in Southern California, gas is over $5 a gallon. It doesn't really affect me because I'm rich, but it kicks the shit out of like the gardeners and the construction workers and the guys who drive the big trucks with the equipment and have to, I used to be a carpenter. You got to drive a truck. You got to carry around your tools and equipment. You don't get good gas mileage. You can't afford an electric car. There's not really many options for gardeners to drive an electric truck. And when you're going into Beverly Hills or the Palisades, chances are you live in Sun Valley or Van Nuys. I mean, you're doing a lot of driving with a truck that gets 9 miles to the gallon filled with all the equipment, and the gas is kicking the shit out of these people.
Yeah, it's one reason why I think it's going to be a very tough climate for whoever is in power, which right now is the Dems, at least nationally, because inflation is really hurting people, gas prices, a lot of other things, some food items. And I'm with you on trying to transition to better forms of energy, but you can't ignore the realities and the needs of today. It's one reason why I was pro nuclear energy, which I'm going to suggest is very much something that people are treating ideologically in a way that they shouldn't. It's a clean energy source relative to a lot of what else we're using. It's very robust. If you are going to try and move on, you would be for some version of nuclear. And the technology's come a long way. The problem is that politically, some people just don't like the sound of it, really. They just think, oh, nuclear, and they think Chernobyl or these other things. But I'm pro the next generation of nuclear technologies. And if you're going to get serious about trying to both provide us the energy that we need, and try and clean up our sources, I think nuclear should be a big part of it.
Yeah, I liken it. There's a version on the right and the version on the left. So the nuclear left version is you who never stop speaking about the environment. Well, there is a reliable and safe form of energy that doesn't harm the environment at all or nearly as much as coal, fracking, and every fossil fuel, and you're dead set against it. I used to run into this as it pertained to the right when I used to do Loveline with Dr. Drew way back in the day. There was something when the morning after pill first came out. It's got to be, 25 years ago now. All the folks that were anti-abortion and anti-everything, the right came out against the morning after pill. And my thing was like, hey, you people hate abortion, then here's a pill you can take that's not an abortion pill. It just it prevents the egg from implanting. And I won't get too technical, but you of all people should be cheering this on, but yet you of all people are against it. And I feel the same way about nuclear with the left and the sort of green and the sort of tree huggers is you of all people should be for this technology. And you're the loudest against it, which makes me wonder, just like I did with the morning after pill, is this really your wish? Or is there something else going on that I'm unaware of?
It reminds me a little bit, Adam, when I was on the presidential debate stage and I said, look, we should start moving people to higher ground. And people on the left beat me up about it for days afterwards, being like, Yang is somehow like, I don't know, like a defeatist or like a climate change apologist. And I was like, no, I just think we should move people to higher ground because, some of these communities are going to be really hammered. And I didn't see that as an ideological statement. I just saw it as practical. So that's what it reminds me of. It's like, look, it's real life. Like, let's get with a program and not make arguments about the world as we wish it were, but the world as it is.
Yeah. And also it strikes me that talking about race constantly never helped anybody of any race ever, or maybe 50, 60 years ago, but like that it's 2021 and all we do is talk about race. It seems, first off, you could have tapped me on the shoulder in 1997 and went, we're going to move ahead 25 years in the future and we're just going to be arguing over race. I'd be like, that's insane. We were not going to do that. Like, it would have sounded insane that I'd be like, we're going to be all wearing Mylar jumpsuits and driving hovercrafts. It's like, no, we're going to be arguing about race, driving trucks. It's crazy. Where do you think this comes from?
I think this comes from media incentives, Adam, and social media, where if you have an article that talks about various racial narratives, then it just gets better play, better traffic. There are any number of journalists who are somewhat race obsessed, and then they try and push these racialized narratives onto us. It's contributing to the division and agitation. It's just really easy to gin people up and get them pissed off if you talk about race. But I agree with you. It's a major problem. It's one of the reasons why I think we do need both more independent voices who aren't subject to this kind of narrative and an independent political movement that also just wants to solve problems and help realize what most of us want, which is to say, look, we're a lot of things. Yeah, like I'm Asian, but I'm a lot of other things. And let's come together. We're still one country. We're still one people. That's what most Americans want and believe. And that's the way most Americans actually act day to day. You see people of different backgrounds, you're perfectly happy to see them. You know what I mean? It's just when you go into these media rabbit holes or social media rabbit holes, do you think everyone's fucking obsessed with race every moment of their lives? Most people are just not like that.
No, I agree. People look at most people as individuals, and it's really impossible not to. And that's kind of how we're wired. And it seems really destructive to me. It also seems totally irresponsible and very cruel to the people who you're telling have a target on their back. It's not,
especially kids.
Oh my God. There's sort of a white version of it, which you go, well, it's cruel to tell that 10-year-old that he has racism, even if it's unbeknownst to him, he's just a racist or he has privilege or whatever. There's that version of it. I don't really care that much about it. But the part where you're trying to convince large segments of our society that they're not wanted in this society and that they're not going to be able to achieve anything in this society because of how they look, that is the most dangerous message you could ever perpetrate on those people, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you start telling them you're not going to be able to achieve anything because of the way society is stacked against you, it shall come to fruition. There's no doubt about it. So let's talk about other facets of the Forward Party. Where are you guys at with taxes, for instance?
My basic thesis on the presidential was that technology is going to get more and more powerful And we need a way to benefit from AI and other technologies where government revenue is concerned. The example I use, Adam, which most people understand very easily, is that there are 2 million Americans who work at call centers right now, picking up the phone. Google now has AI that can do that job. How long until the AI replaces those 2 million workers or a significant proportion of them? And then how much do we get in tax revenue? Right now, most of those call center workers do pay taxes, and Google pays next to nothing because they move the revenue through the Bahamas or Ireland or wherever the heck, because that's just a move for global multinationals. So my big thing on taxes, we need to go where the value is. We have to get it from Google and Amazon and the big tech companies. Big picture, we should be trying to move away from labor-based taxes, because generally in a system, you tax the things you want to discourage. And the last thing we want to do is discourage labor. We should be, we should be like almost reverse taxing. It's like anything we do to get people to work more, we should be doing. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of where I am. There are going to be hundreds of billions of dollars of value that get captured by the big tech companies. And right now, we're not going to see a whole lot of it.
When you're forming a party, do you sit down and go, okay, gay marriage, where are we at? Legalization or decriminalization of drugs, where are we at? Taxes, where are we at? School, pro-choice or not? Abortion, pro-choice or not? Like, do you physically just go, here's our doctrine? Or how does that process work?
It's been fascinating, Adam. What happens with third-party movements like the Forward Party is we try not to take stances on a whole lot of issues that divide the American people, but also are secondary or even irrelevant relative to the challenges we face structurally. Like right now with this duopoly, it's going to turn us against each other, just continue to profit from us. And so if I disagree with you on some other issue, we can agree on that. If you look at the Forward Party and other third-party movements, they try to have a set of principles. Like we have principles that I think most Americans would agree with around grace and tolerance, which is just, appreciating each other as human beings and not trying to judge people of different political beliefs. Fact-based governance, which goes to your logic or Dr. Drew's logic criteria, which is we should be governing based upon facts that we can agree on and then see if you can actually improve people's lives. But we have not taken a stance on a lot of the things you just named because to us, like you and I can agree to disagree on some of them if we can agree on the basic need for a political system that involves more than just these two parties.
Sometimes you'll hear people like Bill Maher speak out against a third party because he believes all it does is sort of rob votes from the Democratic Party. And or the concern is on a lot of this is, you're just going to take some votes away from this party that I want to win. Now, I guess third parties traditionally scrape a few votes away from Democrats, but I don't know what the tradition is. And then who would you imagine the Forward Party would get some votes from? Or do you look at it that way and just go, there's probably a bunch of people that aren't voting that are disgusted with both parties that would come out for the Forward Party?
A few things. Number one, independents right now outnumber Democrats or Republicans significantly. It's something like 45% independent, 28% Democrat, 24% Republican, or something along those lines. So there are a lot of Americans that actually have this other point of view. 62% want an alternative to the duopoly. To Bill's point, people just keep using the spoiler effect as like a club, saying, oh, right, you're going to screw it up for someone. The fact is that the desire for a third party is higher among independents and Republicans than it is among Democrats. You don't know who's going to, end up voting for a traditional third party. The biggest candidate who was a third party candidate, Ross Perot in 92, who you remember, actually led to the Democrat winning. I think objectively, Clinton might not have won against Bush Sr. if Ross Perot hadn't gotten 19.3% of the vote. But the biggest thing, Adam, is that it's a fiction because if you change your voting system to something like ranked choice voting, where you can rank a few candidates that you like, then you get rid of the spoiler effect entirely. this entire binary duopoly, oh, you can't have any other party because you'll make, quote unquote, the bad guys win, is total bullshit. It's just something that the two parties use to try and scare you into voting for one or the other. But if you have any modern voting system like ranked choice voting, then there's no spoiler effect. You can vote for whoever you want, which, by the way, is exactly what most Americans want, right? Like, don't we want to just be able to vote for whomever we want and maybe even elevate an independent or a libertarian or someone who doesn't have a D or R next to their name? So that's the frustration. I tried to say the same thing to Bill. I was like, Bill, come on, man. You're like falling into their trap where you have this archaic voting system that you can just move on from. And then there's no more spoiler effect. And then you don't have to worry about someone, quote unquote, messing it up for someone else.
Well, what do you think about the feasibility of a third party? You brought Ross Perot, 1992. He was a very wealthy, I think, oil man who just was able to use his own war chest to fund his run at the presidency. He wasn't a particularly charismatic guy, but this is all pre-social media, no such thing as being able to, if you want to get your message out, you'd have to go to legacy media. You know, we spoke beforehand about all the podcasts and all the different companies that are popping up now, or Substack or things like that, where different voices, alternative opinions are being heard. Do you feel like this is much more doable now? I'll go back and give an example, which is I think it's easier. We were talking about Elon Musk earlier, and with the advent of the computer, it's much easier to build your own car now than it was when the big three had their sort of monopoly, and it just would have been physically impossible to do it. People try, but never really worked out. Do you feel like with the social media and all the alternative media and stuff like that now, that this is a doable thing because of this versus the sort of uphill climb that Ross Perot had back in the day?
Adam, you're talking mainly about the national race and the presidential dynamic, and it's interesting because the Ford Party wants to make an impact on local races and state races, city races, congressional races even. But what's fascinating is that I think that there is actually the biggest desire for an alternative at the national level. If we end up having a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in 2024, which I believe we're heading towards, by the way,
really,
based upon the things that are happening in both parties, and I can go into that if you'd like.
Yes.
But if you had those two guys as your candidates, and then you had a credible third party candidate, let's call him Mark Cuban or me or someone else, I think you start out with 10, 15% easy, because so many people will be like, oh my God, we're really going to do this again. And then you can go up from there. Again, Perot got 19.3% back in 92. He did have his own bankroll. But if you had someone who could get oxygen or had their own resources or a combination, I think you start out at that level. I'm being conservative. I think that person can get 15, 20, 25%, maybe up to 35, 40%, because the affection for Democrats and Republicans is really low, genuinely. It's just they scare the shit out of you and say, hey, look at the other guy. It's really the main tool.
I've made this joke before as it pertained to Gavin Newsom, but if you had Joe Biden up against Donald Trump, a plastic owl that people put on the roof to scare away seagulls would get 42% of the vote. Like, you've literally, if it was those two, even if it was Donald Trump and Kamala Harris or something, if that's the kind of the scenario, and then you had a Mark Cuban or Magic Johnson or Andrew Yang, like in the other, or Oprah or whoever over there, or The Rock. I mean, oh yeah. I mean, this could propel this third party. You could do what traditionally took 50 years in 5 minutes if you get the right two super unlikable candidates up there. I want to explore why you think it might be. I mean, obviously it's not that bizarre a notion, but what you know and why you think it might be Trump and Joe Biden in just 1 second. First, I'll hit Marshall headphones. Marshall rocked the stages worldwide for over half a century. Now you can carry on this legacy and enhance your music experience. Nothing's been compromised while expanding Marshall Amps' heritage of big stage performance to individual enjoyment of music with Marshall's headphones and speakers. Don't let cords get in the way of your journey. Grab a portable Bluetooth speaker from Marshall, the Emberton compact portable speaker with loud and vibrant sound. Only Marshall can deliver. Durable, 20 hours plus playtime. It's small but powerful. It's got some heft. It's so well made. I'm holding it in my hand right now. Comes in forest green, black and brass, and cream. It is Marshall, right, Dawson?
Get your own portable speaker today at marshallheadphones.com. Use code Carolla15 for 15% off any portable speaker at marshallheadphones.com.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with Andrew Yang and then tell us what insights you have on the possible Biden and Trump rematch right after this. Back with Andrew Yang. Forward, notes on the future of our democracy. It's available on Amazon. And the podcast Forward with Andrew Yang as well. So thoughts on Trump and then thoughts on Biden and Trump.
All right. So Donald Trump still has the approval and loyalty of 65 to 75% of Republican primary voters. And he's raised well over $100 million. He's been telling people in his orbit that he's going to run again. His opposition is likely to be Chris Christie, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, maybe Larry Hogan. The biggest Republican contenders are saying that they will not run against Trump. Nikki Haley said publicly won't run against Trump. Ron DeSantis saying privately won't run against Trump. And if you're Nikki or Ron, you just think to yourselves, I'll just wait out a cycle, because going against Trump is probably a suicide mission, honestly, in the Republican field.
And DeSantis is fairly young. These folks you're mentioning are fairly young. You can just wait it out.
Wait one cycle, right? So you're going to have Trump against a fairly weak field, and I think Trump rolls. Mm-hmm. So that's the Republican field in a nutshell. On the other side, Joe Biden has been telling people he's going to run again. And one of the issues over there is that they don't have an heir apparent outside of Kamala Harris, who polls 5 points worse than Joe. Joe's at 43%. Something recently just had Kamala at like way lower than that in terms of approval rating. And then after that, where do you go if you're the Democratic field? You'd have to go to a competitive primary. It makes you seem fractious and disunified while Trump's coming up the other side. So you probably wind up with Joe again, even though he'll be 81, 82.
Yeah, they had Joe as low as 38, and I think as low as 38, and Kamala could have been as low as 28 recently. So I think her own party's kind of turning on her. I mean, she doesn't seem viable at all. Some people are talking about Pete Buttigieg in there.
Well, the problem again, though, Adam, is that if you were to try and make it someone like Pete, you have to go through a primary. One of the reasons why Pete ended up doing poorly in the primary last time when I was running was that he didn't connect with voters of color. So as soon as he got to Nevada and South Carolina, it became very, very tough going for him. But you can't just appoint someone, or anoint someone. You wind up having to go through a primary process. And I just don't think that's what Democrats are going to want to do in the face of Trump. So I think you wind up with Joe again.
Well, I don't, I've been saying this out loud for a while. Joe, during the last election, because of COVID and because of the sort of apparatus who basically just went, Joe, we're not going to ask you any questions. Just hang tight. Let us go after Trump and we'll push you into the White House, which seems to have happened. And then Joe started campaigning essentially after he was the president, like giving speeches and, fielding questions, albeit from select groups of the media that were pre-approved and things like that. But he seems like, from a cognitive standpoint, he's, definitely lost his fastball. I don't know how he's going to be 3 years or X amount of years from now, a couple of years from now, getting up on a debate stage, no more sort of teleprompter, COVID-related exile. Like, you're going to have to hit the trail, and you're going to have to answer questions, and you're going to have to duke it out. I just can't imagine him being up to that X amount of years from now.
Well, as the incumbent president, he might just be campaigning from the White House. I mean, there's some advantages there. Mm-hmm. But you're hitting on the concern that a lot of people have, which is he going to have the energy and the stamina after 2.5 more years of being president? There are people that are around him now that are saying that, the wear and tear and the age is evident. And so that's a real concern. I mean, he'll be 81, 82 around what we're talking about. I mean, Trump's no spring chicken. He'll be 77, but he does have a different type of energy to him, where his age doesn't seem as much of an issue.
Yeah, he's got that big dick energy that what's his
got
name?
That crazy old man energy
from where SNL has. Pete Davidson has. Yeah,
but I do joke, Adam. It's like combined age of these two candidates, 158. In like the next cycle, and these are your two leading contenders, the most likely nominees.
Yeah, I like, and maybe just because I've had a beer with him, because I always go, hey, there's a politician, you want a guy you can have a beer with, but you never have a beer with him. But I did have a beer and have interviewed Dan Crenshaw a few times, and I'm like, that's more the kind of guy I'd like to see in position of power. This made more sense. There's a few guys that are out there on both sides where I kind of go, oh, I like that guy and I like that guy. Sad we'll never see him up there.
Adam, one thing I'm just going to throw out there. Imagine if there was a third-party primary for 24 and it had people of different points of view. And I think that would be a very, very powerful and positive thing for the American people, and showing that we don't have to fucking just be beholden to what the Democrats and Republicans say we need to swallow. Right. If you had like a third party primary, anyone from any political alignment can just submit their case to the American people, come on your podcast. Like that would be fun, positive, fascinating, real lowercase d democracy in action. That's something that I would very much like to be a part of in the next cycle.
Do you anticipate anybody from either side of the current parties, kind of getting fed up with the system and jumping ship and thinking about the third party?
I get input every day, or incoming messages from people who are somewhere between intrigued and pumped up, I suppose, because a lot of people are just sick and tired of it, man. Like here's the fundamental problem, Adam. And so you have these two political parties, but you also have the aligned media apparatus of each, and then the capital incentives for each. So as soon as you leave the two parties, you're in the wilderness, and then all of a sudden the votes, the media, and the money aren't there for you anymore. So what we have in front of us as a great American project is to build up the votes, the media, and the money, so that people can go into the wilderness and there's a beautiful community in the wilderness. You're not in a tree house or a lean-to. You're in like, Swiss Family Robinson style, like, like opulent. They're freaking elevators and the whole thing. So that's the great project of the Forward Party, is to make it so that if someone decides to jump ship, they have someplace to go to. That's what we're building right now.
Are you and will you be welcome to go back on CNN and talk about this?
I've been on CNN a few times. The people at CNN, they know me and respect me, I believe. And that's true of journalists and different, like I'm going on Neil Cavuto tomorrow, it's like different journalists. And this is something I didn't know, but you might've known, Adam. I didn't know, but I figured it out later, is that a lot of it's just whether the journalists like you.
Yeah.
It's really like a very, very powerful dynamic. Like if journalists want to shut you out, they'll shut you out. If journalists like and respect you and they think having you on is, like a positive thing for their audience, they'll have you on. I've been staggered by just how both personal and ideological these decisions are. It's not great, honestly. But, I have relationships and enough of an audience where I think people see me as like a fine guest. I'll tell you something funny. I was with Sam Harris not that long ago. Do you know Sam?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know him personally, but I know his work.
So Sam jokingly called me rebel corporate. he's like, you're still in the acceptable zone, like people can like have you on, but like you're the rebel from within that world, which I kind of laughed and took took it as a compliment.
It is interesting. They're journalists that, yes, they like you personally, and so you can go from one side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle. But then some journalists, I think this is kind of the problem, if they don't feel like you're going to echo whatever they're echoing or whatever they're discussing or whatever their platform has taken a stand on, then you're no longer welcome because you're going to say something that's contrary to what they're saying. And that's kind of the end of journalism for those who think that way. And there's a fair amount of that going around. And it's also kind of funny. It's making for sort of funny bedfellows because, I do a podcast with Mark Garagos every week, and he's a good friend and a neighbor, and he was a fixture on CNN, but at some point he started saying things that didn't fit in with CNN, but he's a Democrat, and he's a very liberal guy, and now you turn on Fox, and he's on Fox. And this has happened quite a bit where people are like, they may be liberal, they may be Democrat, or they may be Republican and conservative, but somehow they stop popping up on their own side's network just because they're not really carrying the tune for what that network is humming. And it's kind of sad that that's where we're at. Like Mark Garagos is a guy with tons of opinions, and he should be welcome anywhere. And we should all listen and then agree or disagree.
I think that's one reason why I'm so eager to try and build up independent media because of what you're describing, Adam. It is true that there are these dynamics at play and decisions being made about who to bring on and the rest of it. And it's messed up. It is breaking us. It's also destroying our faith, really, in some objective version of the truth or journalism. I'd love to be a part of helping to fix that. To your point, this is what we need to build, is this independent political movement and then an associated media constellation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as much as this is going to be difficult for the folks, Republican or Democrat or the old guard who's used to having it their way, it's going to really screw up the media too. And it's really going to force the media to get back to doing their job versus, you started as a journalist, you turn into a cheerleader, and now you're going to have to go back to journalism.
Yeah. What's happening right now is that they traffic in such an us versus them, black versus white dynamic. And then a lot of the stuff is not that easy. It's shades of gray and the rest of it. And so you hopefully can push them to your point, competition. It's like right now they don't really need to compete. And to the extent they compete, it's just to try and gin you up more, to give you what you want, to reinforce your current point of view. If we can actually introduce successful offerings where people get a more nuanced version of the truth, they're like, oh, we can't just give them the same party line all the time and just expect them to come back for more. That to me is where we have to go.
Well, also, I mean, think about the public who's digesting the information. If there was this third party, this forward party, then when you said, oh, here's my plan for X, Y, and Z, or here's what I'd like to do, the public could go, oh, okay, well, I guess that's what they want to do, versus, oh, they're just doing that because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, you look no further than COVID. It's like all the stuff. I mean, even the CDC, I sit here and talk to Dr. Drew all day, and he's like, I don't really trust the CDC anymore. I'm a doctor, and I've never, who would ever, 5 minutes ago, would you ever question the CDC? Like so-and-so from the CDC says you got to get your 5-year-olds vaccinated, or 2-year-olds need to wear a mask on an airplane. The CDC was beyond reproach when I was younger, or 10 minutes ago. I would have been, all right, that's what the CDC. Now I'm like, wait a minute, what do they want now? And it doesn't mean they're wrong. Just the fact that I stop and go, wait a minute, what do they want me to do? It's been fractured. Like the idea that you have to stop. There's a Fox version of it. There's a CNN version of it. Like you go, wait a minute. Like you get you take the Kyle Rittenhouse case, you go, CNN, what's your version of it? Okay. He was a lunatic, a white supremacist who went out hunting, peaceful protest. Okay, Fox, what's your version? This guy's an American who deserves to be celebrated. Now you have to stop and go, all right, let me see if I can figure this one out, which is not really what you want from your news. But
it's not what you want at all.
But if Andrew Yang said, here's my take on whatever, I wouldn't go, wait a minute, what's he doing? And I think that's kind of where we're at. And I think it's going to open and give a nice birth to people like yourself.
I hope so. And my book actually has about half a chapter on the failings of the CDC early on in the pandemic. So the fact that people are like, wait a minute, I mean, it's grounded in some reality. They really did drop the ball in epic fashion early on. So regarding them as infallible would actually not be like consistent with the facts, unfortunately. But there is such an appetite, Adam. Again, 62% of Americans want an alternative. We just keep being brainwashed or told that you can't have it. But if enough of us raise our hands and say, no, I want and we can have it, then we can build it. We can actually disrupt the status quo in terms of the media and our politics, give people a positive alternative, something that doesn't make them feel shitty about themselves, their country, their political opponents, the rest of it. I'm super excited. And I knew I'd be excited to have this conversation with you because you're your own man, you're your own independent thinker. And there's so many Americans like you that are just looking up and they don't recognize themselves in the politics of the media.
I agree. And from your mouth to God's ears, I hope, wish you guys Godspeed. And I'm an atheist. The podcast, Forward with Andrew Yang, and the book, Forward, Notes on the Future of Our Democracy. Andrew, join us anytime. Give us an update or just say hi.
I will be back, Adam. Such a blast. Thank you for this.
Always a good time. Good to see you, my friend. All right, last but not least, there's blinds galore. Black Friday and Cyber Monday are right around the corner. Go to blindsgalore.com today and order up to 15 free samples so you're ready when the big sale starts November 23rd. Custom blinds, shades, and shutters, even shades that connect to your smartphone, your smart home, I should say, or your phone, or Amazon Alexa. I have this in my bedroom. You don't have to hardwire them. You charge them up real easy. You do all right from your home. Just go online, take the measurements, and customize it online. I have them in my home. I have them in my studio. I've used the crap out of Blinds Galore. Family owned and run for over 23. I think it's over 23 years. If you have any questions, Blinds Galore's expert customer care team is going to help you every step of the way, online or over the phone. It's Blinds Galore, right, Dawson?
BlindsGalore.com makes it easy to get the designer blinds and shades you've always wanted without the designer price tag. Get your free samples now so you'll be ready for the Black Friday sale on November 23rd when everything will be 50% off. That's BlindsGalore.com and let them know Adam sent you.
He needed an intervention from Alice Cooper very early on in his career, which is basically, hey, all this fucking ghoul makeup, that's just so I can hammer a check.
I really go golfing.
Then I live in Prescott.
Right.
And I fucking golf.
Right.
And I check my stock portfolio from the links. Like, you got to fucking drop it. This isn't a lifestyle. You're not
You don't take work home with you.
You're not an actual ghoul.